The unforgiving woods, a chilling tale, 5 friends, 1 cursed forest, countless terrors. Dusk painted the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple as the friends arrived at the edge of Blackwood Forest. Laughter echoed through the trees, their youthful exuberance momentarily eclipsing the oppressive atmosphere of the woods. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, hung heavy around them. They unloaded their gear, each movement punctuated by the rustling of leaves and the snapping of twigs. The forest seemed to watch them with a cold, calculating gaze, its silence more unnerving than any sound. As the last rays of sunlight faded, plunging the forest into an inky blackness, they huddled around a crackling fire, their laughter now a nervous tremor in the face of the encroaching darkness. Mark, the self-proclaimed leader, exuded an air of confidence that belied the shiver that ran down his spine as he glanced into the impenetrable darkness beyond the firelight. Jessica, ever the pragmatist, busied herself with organizing their supplies, her outward calmness a facade to mask the unease that gnawed at her. And then there was Chris, the quiet observer, his gaze distant, lost in the dancing flames, as if privy to secrets hidden from the others. Little did they know the real story was about to begin, a tale spun from the very fabric of Blackwood Forest. The first night descended like a shroud, smothering the forest in an oppressive silence. The friends, their initial bravado waning, retreated into their tents, the flimsy nylon walls offering little comfort against the unseen terrors that lurked beyond. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by the rustling of leaves, the snapping of branches, and the unsettling feeling of being watched. A blood-curdling scream shattered the stillness. Emily bolted upright, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath coming in ragged gasps. David, his eyes still heavy with sleep, mumbled words of comfort, his hand reaching out to soothe her. It was just a nightmare, he assured her, his voice barely above a whisper. But deep down, a primal fear gnawed at his insides. The scream, so real, so close, had stirred something dark and ancient within the forest. They lay awake for what felt like hours, their senses on high alert, listening for any sound that might signal danger. The wind howled through the trees, its mournful cry seeming to carry whispers of warning. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, taking on menacing shapes in the flickering firelight. Every creak of the trees, every rustle of leaves sent shivers down their spines. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the dense canopy, the friends emerged from their tents, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes betraying a night of terror. The day dawned bright, the sun's rays doing little to penetrate the oppressive atmosphere that had settled over the campsite. The tranquility of the morning was shattered as they gathered for breakfast, a palpable sense of unease replacing the previous day's camaraderie. Mark called out, his voice echoing through the eerily silent woods. No response. Their laughter from the previous day felt like a distant memory replaced by a growing sense of dread. They searched the campsite, their calls growing more frantic with each passing moment. The forest, once a source of adventure, now seemed to mock them with its indifference. Had he wandered off in the night? It seemed uncharacteristic of Chris, a creature of habit, to leave without a word. The forest held its breath, its silence amplifying their growing fear. They searched the perimeter of their campsite, their calls growing increasingly desperate, but Chris was nowhere to be found. The sun, now directly overhead, cast long, distorted shadows through the trees, as if the forest itself was toying with them. A knot of fear tightened in Mark's stomach. Something wasn't right. S3, Chris? Fear, palpable and cold, settled over the group. The playful banter of their arrival was replaced by a tense silence, broken only by the frantic chirping of unseen birds. The forest, once an invitation to adventure, now felt like a menacing entity, its verdant beauty masking a sinister secret. "He probably just went for a walk," she said, her voice trembling slightly. betraying her forced composure. But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Even Mark, usually so sure of himself, felt a shiver of fear crawl up his spine. The woods had always held a certain allure, a promise of the unknown, but now the unknown felt dangerous, menacing. He tried to remember the survival tips he'd read, but logic seemed to evaporate in the face of the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume them. "We need to find him." Mark's voice was tight, his earlier confidence replaced by a steely determination. They decided to split up, a decision born more out of desperation than logic. The forest, once a source of wonder, had become a labyrinth of fear, each step forward taking them deeper into its clutches. "Chris, where are you?" Jessica's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. David pulled her close, his own heart pounding in his chest. Meanwhile, Jessica and Mark took a different path. Their eyes peeled for any sign of a struggle, any clue that might lead them to Chris. The silence of the forest was deafening, broken only by the sound of their own footsteps and the frantic beating of their hearts. A flash of red, a splash of color against the monotonous green, stopped Jessica in her tracks. It was Chris's bandana, the one he always wore on his hikes, snagged on the thorny branch of a gnarled bush. Hope, fragile yet insistent, flickered in the pit of her stomach. She called out to Mark, her voice sharp with urgency. "This way," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. They followed the trail of broken branches and disturbed leaves, their pace quickening, hope battling with the ever-present fear. The deeper they ventured into the woods, the darker it seemed to become, the sun's rays struggling to penetrate the dense canopy of leaves overhead. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a clearing, a small patch of sunlight in the otherwise oppressive darkness of the woods. And there, in the center of the clearing, was Chris's backpack, lying open on the ground, its contents scattered around it. As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows through the trees, panic set in. The friends regrouped at the clearing, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. The discovery of Chris's backpack, while initially a beacon of hope, had only deepened the mystery. Where was he? What had happened to him? "We need to get help," Rachel sobbed, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to get out of here." The forest, once a place of tranquility, now felt like a prison, its beauty masking a sinister intent. They tried to retrace their steps to find their way back to the familiarity of their campsite, but the forest seemed to conspire against them, the paths twisting and turning, leading them in circles. Panic gnawed at the edges of their sanity. The forest, once a place of solace, now echoed with their fear. The rustling leaves whispering taunts, the gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. As darkness enveloped the forest, so too did despair. They huddled together for warmth, their fear a palpable entity in the cold night air. The forest, no longer a passive observer, seemed to come alive, its anger palpable. Thorns reached out, tearing at their clothes, their skin. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe, as if the forest itself was trying to suffocate them. Their every step was met with resistance, the undergrowth seeming to reach out and grab at their ankles, pulling them down. They stumbled through the darkness, their senses on high alert, every shadow a lurking monster, every sound a whispered threat. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing through the trees. Emily, Jessica, they couldn't tell. Panic surged through them, threatening to overwhelm their already frayed nerves. They were lost, hopelessly lost, trapped in a nightmare of their own making. They had become prey, hunted by an unseen force that reveled in their terror. With the first light of dawn, a sliver of hope pierced the darkness. They had to get out, to escape the clutches of the unforgiving woods. Their energy was depleted, their bodies battered and bruised, but their will to survive burned bright. They moved with a newfound urgency, their fear a constant companion urging them onward. They stumbled upon a stream, its water gurgling over rocks, a symphony of normalcy in the heart of the terrifying unknown. Could this be their way out? They followed its course, their hope flickering like a candle in the wind. Every bend in the stream, every clearing they crossed, held the promise of escape. Yet the forest held them captive, its grip relentless. But the forest wasn't done with them yet. The path, if it could be called that, was fraught with obstacles. Fallen trees, their trunks slick with moss, blocked their way. They emerged from the woods, three silhouettes against the backdrop of the rising sun, their clothes torn, their faces etched with terror. They had escaped the clutches of Blackwood Forest, but they were forever changed. The woods had taken something from them, something they could never get back. Chris was never found. His disappearance remained a mystery, a chilling tale whispered amongst the locals. The forest, silent and watchful, held its secrets close, the truth lost somewhere amongst its dark and ancient trees. The survivors bore the scars, both physical and emotional, of their ordeal. They carried the weight of their experience, the chilling memory of their friends' laughter echoing in the silence of their nightmares. Some say the forest is cursed, a place where darkness reigns and evil lurks. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. Blackwood Forest was a place of unspeakable horror, a place where nightmares became reality.